share my screen. Oh, hang on a second, maybe I won't. And then I'll go to that. You probably read my chat with Paul up in Queensland. And now I've got to try to, wow, okay. So this session, Kathy, is all about just getting everybody ready to go out and undertake their safe system assessment. The first 3 sessions have been ensuring that we have a really good, consistent understanding of the safe system philosophy. We understand how to categorize exposure, likelihood, severity. We understand how to sort of look at different infrastructure and get a good idea of where we're seeing risk presented. Understanding how we're going to quantify severity of crashes. So, which types of crashes are more severe than other types of crashes, and what are our general tolerances and the like. This one now is really sort of putting that all together and showing you how do you actually fill out one of these safe system assessments and write it up and do the scoring and the like. And then we will give you your site, which some of you already have checked to see that that's in a nice spot for you. We'll point you at some templates and we'll give you your assignment to do. Kathy has already hit record, so we're up and running. So, as I mentioned there, this session all about how you do it, but we're going to point you at some different safe system assessment guidelines, so you can dig into a bit more detail if you need to. We're going to talk about the safe system assessment matrix. The matrix is the meat of a safe system assessment. We'll talk about the reporting. And then we're going to spend some time about categorizing treatments into primary or supporting. Now, some of you have been doing this in road safety audits now, which is good. It's certainly something that's sort of Austroads has pushed along, and it's appearing in the road safety audit guidelines, the new updated Part 6, Austroads Guides to Road Safety Part 6, which is Road Safety Audit 2022 version, just came out. It's also very much squarely in the safe system assessment framework. And actually, probably Kathy later on will bring up the safe system assessment framework, the Austroads document, because there's some really useful assistance in there in categorizing primary and supporting, because it's really something that people new to this have a little bit of trouble with. But we'll get into that as we go. Of course, count your wallies. So we've done well. We've talked about the safe system. We threw up lots of different diagrams of the safe system, but we talked about the human bodies are vulnerable, the people making mistakes, that shared responsibility, and our different elements or pillars. And yeah, we really delved into those key principles. And then we got into this bit, and we've spent a heap of time now on exposure, likelihood, and severity, and really just getting clear in our mind what factors are influencing each of those. You're probably dreaming of exposure, likelihood, and severity. You've been hearing me say it that much, and you'll see why shortly. And we went through those biomechanics of injury. We went through the very sort of basic curves here. We talked about generally that 10% line being the point where things sort of go really bad really quickly for these different crash types. And we used that and we delved into a little bit further about some different angles, different crash types, and we saw that colorful spectrum, and I'll use that later in this session to be able to help quantify some of these figures. So I've put these again at the start of this session in the notes, so for ease of looking back and just being able to get an idea of the severity of different crashes that will occur. But this is where we want to be. How to do a safe system assessment. And I thought maybe a quick poll to get us going. This one's a genuine poll, not a quiz. But let's see, Kathy, if that pops up, if we have it loaded up. Maybe we don't. Let me see. All right, there it is. What has been your involvement in safe system assessments? Nothing. Safe system what now? I've heard the term, but don't know much more. I've had one done on one of my projects. I've done one. I live, breathe, and eat safe system assessments. Okay. Well, this is to give me a bit of an idea of how we're going with all of this, and an idea. I'm going to go through the basics of it anyway. Doesn't matter, but it'll just help me calibrate a few things. So give that a second. Okay. Let's share those results. Thank you. So most people in that category have heard the term, don't really know too much more, heard safe system, but the assessment part. Quite a number had them done on their projects, and that's good to hear because it is really starting to become a lot more, I suppose, a lot more popular around Australia and New Zealand to have safe system assessments as part of that assurance process within an infrastructure project. Few people have done them. That's great, getting into them. And somebody lives and breathes and eats safe system assessments. That's wonderful. Good. All right. Well, thank you. I'm going to hit stop on that. So that's good. So a number of you then will be very aware that there is an Austroads document titled the Safe System Assessment Framework. It was released in late 2016, and I was on the working group for this this project. I wasn't one of the authors, but I was involved in some of the workshops and some of the thinking around it. And really, well, I suppose about 4 years before that, we started doing these things. A colleague and myself started doing these things. We called them a safe system audit. And the reason for that was that we just found there was a whole lot of different programs that were coming out, the Safe System Infrastructure Program. There was requirements that something must be safe system, and we're only implementing safe system stuff, and everybody sort of was scratching their head or had their own interpretation of what that meant. And so we sort of said, I think there's a need for some sort of independent reporting on how well something aligns with safe system principles. Now, the idea that something is safe system or is not safe system, to me, is a bit, it's not really right, because it's a spectrum. I mean, pure safe system, is a very abstract concept. And so I always talk about alignment with safe system principles. So in the end, the safe system audits we were doing was sort of giving that general commentary around how well it aligns with these high-level principles. But the point was that there was this disconnect between the high-level sort of philosophy of the safe system, which is, oh, nice, and oh, everybody hugging each other, no death and serious injury, and aspiration of this and that. And it's the kind of thing that executive directors and ministers, of course, they're signing up to. But us on the ground making decisions about projects and specifics, how do we take that airy-fairy concept and put it into actual choices and decisions on the ground? We all, want this same ideal, but we've got to make these specific decisions. So, yeah, the idea was to start to provide this reporting. Now, road safety audits were providing decent reporting on road safety, but they weren't necessarily doing it under the context of those specific principles. And I'll show you a little bit in actually our next module in a week's time, a bit about like the differences between a road safety audit and a safe system assessment. And there's significant overlap, but there's significant differences as well. So anyway, we ticked along with a few of those here and there for interested parties, and then Austroads sort of came to the same conclusion and said, yeah, okay, let's get people together and we'll come up with this safe system assessment framework. So there's a uniform framework across Australia and New Zealand on how to assess a project for its alignment with safe system principles, and they produce this document. And the document's sort of got these different sections there. You can see the different colors, talking about what is the objective of the assessment in terms of what's the purpose of doing this assessment, what's the scale that you'll be doing, and the depth of the assessment itself, because it is a very scalable process. What's the context of the project that you're looking at? What's its objectives, function of the road, speed environments, road users, vehicles, and the like. And then into this safe system assessment matrix, exposure, likelihood, severity, and the other elements of the safe system. And then into some treatments or some proposals for alterations to the project to improve its alignment with safe system principles, primary transformational or supporting or other considerations. So I'll take you through some of that now, but you do have a copy of this in Moodle so that you'll be able to look through the document yourself if you would like. And of course, it's an Austroads research report. So that is everything from Austroads is free, all the guides, all the research reports. All you need to do is just log into the Austroads website, create your login, and then you'll be able to download and access all of that free. So after the Austroads document came out, people started using this, and I was certainly out there training up some people, trying to get a bit of traction on the safe system assessment framework. Few people using it here and there, not a huge amount. And then Victoria got quite excited and started doing quite a bit more, and decided they needed some specific guidelines, almost a supplement to the Austroads document, because they recognized some deficiencies in the Austroads document. And that had come about because just more and more people were starting to do them in varied scenarios, varied environments, different projects, and just identified these things don't work that well. How do you do this? And so Victoria came out with the Safe System Assessment Guidelines. They've done a couple of versions of those now. And South Australia also came out with a set of guidelines a few years after the Victorian ones. Now, if you look at these two documents, they are almost identical, except for the front cover and global replace of Victoria with South Australia and Dipti with VicRoads. So it became sort of an accepted process, and generally across Australia and New Zealand, people are operating under the way these guidelines set it out. The Austroads guidelines set it out. These ones clarify. And as we said, there are a few fact sheets that we've done covering off a few topics that haven't quite filtered through into the supplementary guidance, or we just feel there's better guidance required. And most of industry is using those as an interim. And we're hoping that Austroads will come out with a version 2 of the Safe System Assessment Framework that incorporates all of the stuff out of these and some of those other issues are dealt with. And Kathy will show you later where those fact sheets are in Moodle, just in case you can't find them. So what I'm going to be taking you through now is how to undertake a safe system assessment in accordance with the Austroads guidelines, Victorian and South Australian guidelines, the fact sheets, and the general practice across Australia and New Zealand. Nobody's doing anything wildly different. As I say that, Western Australia is probably doing something wildly different, but that's not irregular, is it? Western Australia sort of doesn't do safe system assessments. They have their road safety management system that they believe covers off key elements, and I suppose they're trying to knock it off at a statewide level. And anyway, I've got some issues with that. I think there's some wonderful things that they're doing about it, but anyway, we'll leave Western Australia to themselves. The rest of Australia and New Zealand certainly are going gung-ho, and very similar processes in the assessment methodology. So let's jump into how you do it. Please, as always, questions as we tick along. Don't wait for me to ask if there are any questions. Okay, I'm going to start with the end product, or one of the key things people are looking for out of a safe system assessment, and it's some sort of quantification of safe system alignment for different crash types, for different scenarios that may be out there. And this is here's a very sort of simplistic, almost cartoony style example, but it doesn't matter. We're just trying to get across this general point. You can see here we've got runoff road, head-on, intersection, other, pedestrian, cyclists, motorcyclists. They're all crash types, okay? Certainly these are road users, but they're what, they're a crash type, a crash involving a cyclist, where the cyclist is the one injured, for example. Over here, we're seeing safe system alignment score. And one of the key things to understand here is that the lower the score, the better the alignment with safe system principles. Think of it as risk. So the higher the bar, the higher the bar on the graph here, the higher the risk. So we want to see low. And for each crash type, we see a score for the alignment. In this particular one, red will be representing the existing conditions, what's currently out there. And the orange looks like is representing a scenario where a roundabout will be built. The blue is representing a scenario where a modified T intersection with traffic signals, and the grey a standard T intersection with traffic signals. And so we can see there that compared to the existing conditions, the alignment with safe system principles alters around. So you can see like the intersection crash alignment with safe system principles, for example, it's a lot better with the roundabout. It's a bit better with the modified T. It's about the same with the T for one reason or another from what it exists at. You can see the roundabout's a little worse for cyclists. And so we can immediately gather that understanding of where things lie, and it's quantified. You can see scores on top of it. And so that's what we're sort of aiming to produce. We want to produce that. We want to produce some written commentary around some specific issues and other things. But this is where we're aiming at. So let me show you how you get to this point. I like to start at the end and then work and then come back to the start, and we'll get our way back to that graph. So the first thing you do as a safe system assessor with the safe system assessment team is to ask these prompt questions about the context of the project. You want to gather an understanding of the background of the project to help inform your assessment and to help make meaningful recommendations for any alterations you suggest to the project. So, what's the reason for the project? We're addressing specific issues. What's the speeds we've got? So what's the function of the road, the speed limit, what's the land use, what's the growth that's expected, what's happening up and downstream, what's the speed environment, has it been changed recently, what road users are present. So we've got the elderly or children or cyclists and these sorts of things. What's the vehicle composition? What have we got? Heavy vehicles. So what I tend to do in a safe system assessment team is to grab these qualitative questions, which are straight out of Austroads, often in a Word document, and I'll send them through to the whoever we're doing the assessment for and say, hey, can you please send documentation or answer these questions the best you can? Or sometimes we'll have a commencement workshop where we'll ask these questions. They'll put up the plan, the designs, talk about why the project's happening, the land use, gather that full understanding and context of the project to give a nice platform to be able to jump in and undertake that assessment. And then after you've gathered all of that, we start to jump into undertaking the actual assessment itself. So the first thing we do in an assessment is we analyze the existing conditions. Okay, so take, for example, there's an intersection upgrade proposed, and they've got a design for a roundabout from this give-way controlled intersection, or they've got a design for traffic signals, or they've got adding splitter islands or the like, or they might be at a concept stage where they've got multiple options and they're wanting to get input on safe system alignment in these multiple options. But the first thing you're doing is going out to the existing site, looking at what is there now. Not what are they going to build in the future, but what is there now. And you go through a process of scoring how well the current environment aligns with safe system principles, because that sets us then a relative benchmark to work from. And we use this thing called the Safe System Assessment Matrix. And as I showed you from the graph there, we see up the top here, we've got crash types. We've got runoff road, head-on, intersection. Now, those three are for passenger vehicles or heavy vehicles, okay? Motorized vehicles. Runoff road, head-on, and intersection are vehicles. Pedestrians are when pedestrians are the one injured in the collision. Cyclists, same. It's the cyclist that's injured, motorcyclists. So if you are imagining a crash scenario where a vehicle was to hit a pedestrian at an intersection, the pedestrian's crossing the intersection, the vehicle, runs through the intersection or maybe turns over the pedestrian. We think about that in the pedestrian crash, not the intersection crash, okay? Because the pedestrian is the one that's being injured, okay? If it was a vehicle occupant struck by a vehicle occupant, struck by a vehicle, so a vehicle-to-vehicle crash at that intersection, then that's in the intersection line. So the other category there, is trying to capture anything that you, as an assessment team, identify that hasn't been captured by any of these other categories. Now, this could be crashes with animals. It could be sideswipe crashes. It could be railway level crossing crashes. Could be e-scooters, if you believe that was a particular cohort that was not adequately catered for in the pedestrian category. So maybe you're in an inner city area and you want to specify that. That's your particular road user. Well, take e-scooters, for example. There's a recent tragic incident where somebody was killed on their e-scooter, struck by a cyclist, I think. So cyclist versus e-scooter rider. In that scenario, you know, we would give that the other crash, not necessarily the cyclist crash, if we believe that was the road user of concern. In that actual one, if we weren't being reactive and looking back on it, we'd probably allocate risk to both parties in that. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that think about who is injured in the crash as where to be attributing along this crash, these crash columns. Then we have exposure, likelihood, and severity. Okay, hallelujah. We're back here somewhere comfortable. We know exposure, we know likelihood, we know severity. And you'll see here that we want to put a number in each of these cells of the matrix. And we want to put a number between 0 and 4. Okay? To get to be able to put numbers in there, we utilize a thing which we call the scoring reference sheet. Again, straight out of the Road Safe System Assessment Framework. And what it does is it shows you their exposure, likelihood, and severity, and 0, 1, let me go a little further up here, 2, 3, 4. And let's look, for example, at 3, because I'm on this screen now. Exposure says there, volume of vehicles that might be involved in a particular crash type are high, therefore exposure is high. For run-off road, head-on, and other crash types, AADT, annual average daily traffic, is between 5,000 and 10,000 vehicles a day. Okay, we've got some numbers, we've got some specifics. For cyclist, pedestrian, and motorcycle crash types, volumes are between 50 and 100 units per day. Right. Okay, so this is pretty good. We've got actual numbers that we can work with. So if we are given the traffic volumes, the pedestrian counts, the cyclist counts, the motorcycle counts, all we need to do is come back to this scoring reference sheet and see where it fits. So a 2 is between 1,000 and 5,000 AADT, or 10 to 50 units per day. 4 is above 10,000, above 100 units a day. And we go down, we see there less than 1,000, less than 10. And the 0 is there's no side flow, no intersecting road. We've got no exposure for a 0. So that's pretty good, isn't it? Because it makes it fairly easy for us to then go, okay, we've got an AADT of 4,000 at this on the main road here, and we've got 500 on the side road. Okay, so we 4,000. Where does 4,000 sit? Okay, 4,000 between 1,000 and 5,000. We're going to take a 2 there. We go back and we go 2 and a 2. Intersections, you can see there, AADT for each approach. Okay, so we've got, in our hypothetical scenario here, we've got 4,000 and we've got 500 on the side road. So 4,500 still sits in between at 1,000 and 5,000. So we're still going to go 2. Other, well, it depends what we've decided on that. So let's say we've gone side swipe, or maybe crashes with vehicles emerging from driveways and a few other things. We sort of justify which of these we're going and why, and then we're still going to go a 2 because that's the main thoroughfare. Then we get into pedestrians, and this is where I often find saying to the client, do you have pedestrian counts? And they're like, no, don't have any pedestrian counts. They tend to have extremely good historic records of traffic volumes, but next to nothing on pedestrians and cyclists, which is changing and hopefully changes more, and it shows maybe a bit about how we've been operating the road environment for a long time. But you then may need to make a judgment call. You may need to, from your site visit, what you've viewed, or asking them, there's a lot of pedestrians, where are we at, and make a bit of a judgment call on it. And this is where you can look and say, okay, so what have we got here? For cyclists, pedestrians, and motorcyclists, 10 to 50 units a day, 50 to 100 units a day, more than 100. And you might make your call, whatever you decide, it is. So let's, for this one, say we've got very few pedestrians, very occasional pedestrian activity. So we're going to go with a 1. Cyclists, the same. There's very few cyclists, so we're going to go a 1. And motorcyclists, well, motorcyclists, you can usually just take a 1 or 2% of AADT is usually pretty safe, unless it's, say, a popular motorcycle route or the like. So let's go with a 2 on that. So then we've got some scores there. You do write a little bit of justification in the exposure. You're going to write a lot more justification in the likelihood as to how you've arrived at these numbers, but that's given us then a line where we've got numbers now for the exposure to crashes of the existing road environment. I'll pause there before I jump into the likelihood, and we'll see if there's any questions that I need to deal with. We'll do after this likelihood and severity. No, looks like we are good. Okay, I'll keep going. So, but do keep your questions coming in as we go. Hopefully you're piecing this together. So the next thing next row is likelihood. And we're trying to now get to a score for the likelihood of crashes, a score again between 0 and 4. So as we saw there from exposure is pretty clear cut. Once you've got numbers, you put it in. Okay, there's a bit of judgment if you are not given pedestrian volumes or traffic volumes, if you don't have those, but you've got to make a bit of judgment. But generally, it's fairly clean cut. Likelihood, on the other hand, is quite subjective. But let's have a look at some of the definitions here. I'm going to jump to the next one here and see what a 2 is, a score of 2 for likelihood. It is unlikely that a given crash type will occur. Oh, that doesn't give us much info. It is likely that a given crash type will occur. Okay, we're not getting much help here, are we? Let's go with a 4. Let's see what a 4 says. There's more words here. The likelihood of individual road user error leading to a crash is high given the infrastructure in place, e.g. high approach speeds to a sharp curve, priority movement control, filtering across several opposing lanes, high speed. Okay, we've got a bit more of an understanding. Let's go back. Highly unlikely given crash type will occur, and a 0, it's only minimal chance. And really giving a 0, though, in likelihood is almost never done, because we are thinking about humans making mistakes and the like. But we...
And sorry, would you refer to crash data for that one?
No. So that's a temptation. You'd be tempted to go to crash data. However, crash data is the product of exposure, likelihood, and severity. So you can't pick it out. It doesn't quite make sense to utilize that. What you're doing is your end product scores should reflect crashes over a large area. Once if you know, the law of small numbers and the like, we need enough areas or enough intersection to get some statistically significant outcomes and the like. So you don't use crash data to justify your likelihood scores. What you're using is your knowledge about what influences the likelihood of crashes. Now, road safety auditors, experienced auditors are really, really good at this. Others are really good at this as well, who just have a general understanding of factors that influence the likelihood of crashes and what the magnitude of that is. We've written a fact sheet, particularly on likelihood scoring, because if you take it at face value, everything sits as a 1, basically. Highly unlikely. I mean, and the reason for that is crashes are highly unlikely. So what we've had to do is clarify that this is at a relative scale, and it kind of, the 4 lends itself to explaining that, you know, it's characteristics of the road environment that make it higher likelihood than the general, you know, other like roads or what we know as best practice in terms of reducing the likelihood of crashes. So I tend to save the 4 for those things that really are going to enhance crash likelihood in a big way. You know, yeah, the adverse crossfall around a curve, the see-through effect at the intersection, really big picture stuff. And then some of the other ones, the 3s and the 2s, are where there's inherent likelihood because people are going to stuff up. There's nothing particular that the road environment is doing. You know, maybe we're on the Hume and it's long and it's straight. You know, it's got nice sealed shoulders and audio tactile, so things are looking good, but it's just people are going to fall asleep, and of course they're going to leave the road. So the likelihood, you know, it's unlikely, but it's still going to happen. So in this, you make this call, right? But you don't just plonk a number in there. You justify it with dot points. Now, in this sort of safe system assessment matrix example thing here, these dot points are just saying, oh, you know, this could be influenced by speed, geometry, shoulders, barriers, offsets to barriers, delineation, or over here, you know, design of pedestrian facilities, separation, number of conflict points, direction, speed, etc., etc. When you fill out the cell of the matrix, you're going to list all the things that made you want to make this score higher and all the things that made you want to make this score lower. And then you're going to put a score. You might put a 2 and a 1, 2, 2, and a 4, and a 4, and a 3, maybe. That's a 2 we put up there, isn't it? Yeah, so you'll get to that, but you won't just go, oh, I reckon it's a 2. Oh, no, you go, okay, let's have a think through this logically. Signs are good, line marking's good, it's got good lighting, the surface is good, the you know, it's got audio tactile, it's got sealed shoulders, it's got big clear zone areas, so there's less chance that people are going to hit something, and you're dot pointing a whole lot of these things out. You're referring back to this to help you a little bit. You'll probably look at the fact sheet we've got, and you'll make a nice little story as how you've arrived at that score for the existing condition. Then you go to severity. Okay, and we look at the severity scores, and I'll look again at the 2 to start with. Here we go. Should a crash occur, it is unlikely that it will result in fatal or serious injury to any road users involved. Kinetic energies are moderate, and the majority of time are effectively dissipated before reaching the road user. What does that mean? Effectively dissipated before reaching the road user. That means, you know, it's directed out into the environment, or it's absorbed by energy absorbing features. So unlikely to result in death or serious injury. All the way up to, say, a 4 here, highly likely to result. Here we've got likely. A 1, highly unlikely. And then a 0. Should a crash occur, there is only minimal chance that it'll result in fatal or serious injury for any road user. In this one, they say users may refer to safe system critical impact speeds for different crash types while considering impact angle, roadside hazard barriers, and the sort of severity of crash. Now, to help you on this one, this is where we produce this. So you remember this from session 1. Showed it to you. And we've started to list some crash types, list the speed of the bullet vehicle in that crash, and then done a graded colored scale there. General indication only, professional judgment required. You really got to think about this, trying to give a general feel for it. But we certainly know there motorcyclists or cars and pedestrians, you know, up around the 40, 50, 60, 70 kilometers an hour. Of course, we're into the 4, very likely death. You know, the 3's around there. But if we're, you know, able to do it within the 20 kilometers per hour, we're in the sort of 1 or 2 maybe category. Down further, you might be in the point of saying a 1 or a 0 even for that. So this is how this can sort of be used. Remember, it's a bit of a general judgment guide only. Don't get too fixated on it. But it's going to help you. It's going to help you to calibrate your scoring. So then you're able to get back to here and say, well, the features influencing severity, I mean, you see in each one of these speed. Speed's so influential on the severity of crashes. Okay, speed's going to occur up in likelihood as well, but speed, big one there. Then for different crash types, you'll see, you know, the roadside features for run-off road crashes. Of course, you know, are we talking about power poles, or are we talking about barrier systems, or are we talking about houses to hit, or culverts, or are we taking cleared areas with rollover risk? Percentage of heavy vehicles plays a little bit into this one. You know, if you have a head-on with a car, there's going to be less energy transfer compared to a head-on with a heavy vehicle. You might have in pedestrians, for example, the vulnerability of the pedestrians. If it happens to be lots of old people or lots of young people, it might be a little bit more severe. So you might be tweaking around a little bit with the scoring of severity. But, you know, we have general themes of what's going to influence it. Speed, if it's vehicle to vehicle, angle, speed being the really big one here. So you end up putting your scores in there. Maybe put a 2 there, and you put a 1 there because, you know, head-ons can be done at a bit higher speed because you've looked at your graph and intersections. You've put a 3, and whatever you were thinking of, maybe it gets a 2 or whatever. And again, you're justifying this with some notes. Pedestrians get a 4, cyclists get a 4 because there are vulnerable road users, motorcyclists get a 4. So you've got to this point now where you've put numbers to each of these and you've justified those numbers. I'll show you some examples of this a little bit later on. And then you multiply. You multiply all of these out. And so you go 2, 4, 8, and you go 2, 2, 2, and you multiply all of these out. Well, 16 and 16. And yeah, hang on, I don't even have a number in there. So whatever it is. So you've multiplied these out, and now you're getting those scores. And you then add them up. You add up the bottom. So you take all of that and you add it up. And you end up with a final score out of 448. So you might get, 100 out of 448, or you might get 300 out of 448, or whatever it is. But that's this is what the existing road environment is in. It's in alignment with safe system principles overall. You've got a nice graph that shows you where that's coming from. So this one, immediately we can see, well, pedestrians and cyclists still are, even though they're low volumes, they're still at the greatest risk. And we can see some other things there, and it tells you a bit of a story. Okay, so we've got our baseline, our existing conditions, and then we take that and we go off and we start to look at the designs and we start to alter it. So I think it's probably going to be easy for me to walk through a bit of an example then of how we take the existing conditions like this one, for, as a hypothetical example, and how we then take that and create some scores for some designs and some options that are in there. But Kathy, what do you think? We take a little break now before I jump into this?
Yes, absolutely, Ken. And a comment just came through whilst you're on there. There's a couple of things, if you can address them now, and then we'll take a break. Yeah. If we did an SSA for a new greenfield corridor, interested to how to refer for a comparison.
Yeah. So very good question. So there are two sort of options you have. The first one is if the greenfields is providing an alternate route. So take, for example, you're out on the Western Highway and they're doing a bypass of townships, and you can then utilize the existing Western Highway alignment through those townships as your baseline. And then you can use the alternate route, the new one proposed through the greenfields, the new bypass. You can use that then as your design, and you can compare everybody traveling through the townships to everybody taking the bypass. Okay, so that's one option. If it completely doesn't work, you like that, it doesn't make sense. There is no exactly defined, route as clean and clear as that. It's all a bit of a mess of how it would get there. Or it's so massive, it doesn't make sense to do that. So take, for example, we had a group of us did the safe system assessment for Northeast Link in Victoria and Melbourne. Big, whatever it is, $12 billion, $16 billion project. It's massive, and it rings around, and it really doesn't make it. It's so hard to say, well, the existing route is from here to here, because it comes in all over the place and there's different bits and pieces, and really it's a mess. And you'd probably spend 6 months looking at traffic modeling to try to work out, where you proportion the existing conditions, even at the end of that, you go, oh, it's all a bit, yeah. So in that case, you don't actually set yourself an existing conditions. Okay, you simply take the proposed designs of the greenfield and score those. And if there's multiple designs, you will get relative differences off the options, but you won't have that baseline to start with. Okay, that's fine. Or I suppose it depends what people are trying to do with it, but that can be fine if they're just trying to work out, well, we've got 3 alignment options here. We've got different intersection forms throughout this alignment. We've got different cross-section characteristics and the like, you will get a relative comparison between the three options. And you'll be able to then say, well, this option aligns best with safe system principles at an overall score, but you're really going to have to think about, cyclists because they're still not performing that well. And here are some other ideas that makes it even better. But if you want to go with, these other options, here are some ideas to improve those as well. So that's all an acceptable way to do it. So there's a couple of options. Any other questions, Kathy?
Thank you, Ken. Now, giving a prize to Ruz, who kindly pointed out that the PDF in Moodle was slightly different to the one you're presenting on because the one in Moodle had length of road in exposure.
Well done. I took that out because, so if you're very eagle-eyed, the reason I took that out is that it says length of road in the Austroads guide, but if you look into the Victorian government guidelines, it occurs there in some versions, and then there's commentary in the back that says that really we're interested in exposure as the number crossing. Then we've done a fact sheet as well on this. So this is one of those examples of, in theory, exposure talked about, well, I'm just using what I've got on screen here, actually. Okay, exposure would be how many pedestrians are crossing here and for how long are they exposed to crashes on the road. But what we ended up doing and discovering as we played this out was that if you try to combine the two, you potentially end up double counting risk. And this is part of the drawing exposure out of likelihood. So in the end, to keep it very clean cut, I just decided, or industry practice now, is to just use the number of pedestrians crossing. This length that they're crossing is one of the factors in the chance of crash, the likelihood, and then you'll also have in there, well, it's around the curve here, and there's no crossing facilities. It's got lighting, so that's good. There's no actual pram ramps or anything, and whatever, the speeds and the surface condition and all of those other factors get put in there. So that is really good spotting. I hope you gave a prize there for that, the eagle-eyed look there.
Absolutely, sure did. Thank you. And I've updated that presentation in Moodle now as well.
Oh, good.
Is it time for a break?
Yeah. All right. Let's fill up the waters, have a stretch. Back. We'll kick it off in what? 4 minutes?
4 minutes.
Okay. Let's get back into it. So I'm just going to walk through a little bit of a hypothetical example, a fairly simplified example. I'll probably show you on screen something a bit more complicated later, just to show you some outputs, and you'll get an idea once you start practicing these. But here we go. We've got an intersection here, give way controlled, passively controlled give way signs there. You can see a bit of a footpath, and the plan is to build a roundabout at that location, or to build a set of traffic signals, or to do some major realignment work and build traffic signals again. So you've got there your three designs, and this is a pretty nice sort of time to be undertaking the assessment, because you've got a little bit of meat on the bone in terms of their ideas, but not so much that they're tens of thousands of dollars into or many thousands of dollars into the design work and the drainage and the pavement plans and everything like that, where they're sort of very reluctant to actually change anything because they're kind of locked into an idea. So the first thing you do there is you produce your existing conditions matrix. And here's an example. Don't worry about reading the detail of this, but this is still a fairly light on one. But you can see there's a little bit of information about the exposure, but you've got your exposure scores in there because of the AADT and the numbers. You've got your likelihood factors, and you can see factors that increase likelihood. There's a few dotted there. Factors that decrease likelihood of crash, few dotted there. And there's a final score. Now that's an interesting one. They've gone 2.5. Okay. The use of a decimal point in the Safe System Assessment Framework is discouraged, but can be done, but only at a 0.5. You can't go more refined than a half. There's a few reasons for this. So the reason the 0.5 came into play was that the scoring reference sheet sort of is so ambiguous in the jump between sort of it's unlikely to likely, and you're saying, that's a big jump. But the second one is that you often within the Safe System Assessment team, there's debate, and you're like, I really think that should be a 2. I really think that should be a 3. 2, 3, and you come to your compromise as a 2.5. But the reason we want to keep these decent sized bands is, one, the Safe System Assessment is not a refined precision assessment tool. It's a broad brush tool. The second one is that you have to get some genuine, significant road safety gains to jump a point down. And this is how we're going to start to see step change. Okay? We're not going to, what we're trying to not see is the infrastructure project that has a large amount of inherent risk. It doesn't align well with safe system principles. And as a result, the report's done and they put up some warning signs. And we're like, well, so in a safe system assessment, the warning signs, you'd be lucky to get a 0.5 change in a particular likelihood. In fact, you probably wouldn't give a 0.5 just for warning signs. They're not significant enough to change. And this is the thing, we're not going to get significant gains in road safety. We're not going to get these step changes. We're not going to get to that, aspiration of 0 death and serious injury by putting up warning signs. We need fundamental changes, meaty changes, big changes to happen. And so that's it. And this plays out in a lot of safe system assessments where you've handed over your safe system assessment. It's got a score of, whatever, and they've got their design, and the design's got a score of whatever it is, 200 or something. And they say, oh, well, we're going to, instead, we're going to use thicker line marking, or we're going to use high glass bead line marking. So it really, stands out. And they go, can you tell us the score change that will give? And they can say the score will be exactly the same. And then, but okay, well, we're going to put some warning signs up. The score will be the same. We're going to put warning signs on both sides of the road. The score will be the same. Yeah, maybe eventually after we've got the high glass bead line marking, we've got warning sign, maybe the big warning signs with this and that. You go, okay, you got 0.5 off the likelihood of crashes. But, the speeds are high, the geometry induces high speed, the intersection's there, there's no speed control, there's no severity control, people are going to still overshoot this intersection. We're talking, if you want to get that score from 200 down to, something 100 or less than that, you're going to have to start to genuinely alter this project. And it's good. It's good because we need this push for much greater alteration in exposure likelihood and severity, not just trying to tweak around with likelihood as we've been traditionally doing in a lot of projects. Okay, so you've got that. They've got the likelihood score, and then severity. That there's some factors increasing the severity, decreasing the severity. There's the severity score. There's the total score with the multiplication of these. And there, and then we get a total score out of 448 of 118.5 for the existing conditions at that site. Then you copy this. You copy this whole thing, the whole matrix, copy it, paste it, then look at the design. You look at the first design, which is maybe a roundabout, and you start to alter it. And you say, okay, when they build this roundabout, how is it going to change these characteristics of exposure, likelihood, and severity? And so you start to then cross out things that have gone. Okay, well, once the roundabout's built, that's not an issue anymore. That's not an issue anymore. That's not an issue. Here's a new thing that's going to be good, or here's, new things that are going to be bad or good. So you can see there in red, new things, cross out old things, color numbers that have changed. And you go through and you do that for your first design option. And you get this new matrix, which shows where changes have happened. You go back and you get the existing conditions again, you copy it, paste it, and then you alter it for the next design. Okay, in this one, okay, we're crossing out these bits, but we've added things here, and we've added this bit here, and added this bit here, and we've changed these numbers. And you go back and you get the existing conditions matrix again, copy it, paste it, take your next design. And then what changes in this one? And you keep doing that for as many design options as you are asked to assess. And so then you end up with this sort of high level result. You've got an existing condition score there, and you can see the roundabout will get the highest alignment with safe system principles. It's the best score, the lowest score overall. Modified T intersection with signals, or it's the next best, the normal T with a signalization in this environment. And that brings us back then to the graph that we showed at the start. Now you can see how it's been arrived at and how it and what sort of sense it makes. So that's how we get to that. And this is the sort of output people will be expecting. This is what the regional reference, or regional PRC, regional project control groups, and the executive groups are going to be looking for. They're going to say, well, are we improving alignment with safe system principles? What are the areas that are still not great? Can we do better? And the can we do better is good, because what we do in a safe system assessment is we do all of that, we make all of those scores, but then for each of these, okay, for the roundabout design, for the signal design, for the other signal design, we say, here's some ideas on improvements that you could make to bring these scores down. Okay. And so we're always trying to bring the scores down, even if it is better. Overall, we go, hey, look, all of these designs improve alignment with safe system principles. Okay. This one just improves the most as it currently is, but all of them improve alignment with safe system principles. They will improve road safety. But how can we do better? How can we get even more change out of any of these? So if they do, for some reason or other, say, we're going to go with 3B for these other reasons and this, and we're avoiding a scar tree, and we've got this and these other reasons, and we can't do it, they can look at your safe system assessment and go, all right, well, if we do that, we can put in all of these extra features. We can raise the intersection. We can have speed camera, red light cameras from the start, and whatever it is that you put down as options, and we can get a really good score. We could get a 70 or something from the get-go. And what we do is, as we make all these recommendations or suggestions to the project team for all of their design options, we categorize them. Okay, I'm just going to draw a line there. We categorize them into either primary treatments or supporting treatments. Now, primary treatments are our big, meaty, significant alterations to the design and management that virtually eliminate the potential for fatal and serious injuries associated with foreseeable crash types, associated with that crash type that you're looking at, that column that you were thinking about. Now, really, these have to be things that we know have that significant reduction in the severity of crashes, okay, or exposure to a degree. Very, very hard to get primary treatments from just likelihood reduction in their own right. I mean, one of the best likelihood reducing things we know of at a signalized intersection is the addition of a fully controlled right turn, a red arrow, for example. But we don't give that a primary treatment. That's a supporting treatment because we know people still run the red light. We know it's very effective likelihood. It does a really good job, but we still see death and serious injury with fully controlled right turns because the speeds are still high through the intersection, the energy is still high, and when things go wrong, the severity is bad. So the primary treatments tend to be things like the roundabouts, raised intersections, raised crossing points, continuous barrier systems. And shortly, Kathy will show you in the Safe System Assessment Framework where you can identify what features in the road environment categorize as primary or categorize as supporting. Supporting treatments are things that improve road safety, but they're not expected to virtually eliminate the potential for fatal or serious injury crashes. And the other one is that they don't change the ability for primary treatment to be implemented in the future. And so supporting treatments tend to be all of those things that fit into that likelihood category most of the time anyway. So signs, line marking, lighting, surface, audio tactile, geometric changes in terms of, super elevation or, straightening out a curve or these sorts of things. Signals, traffic signals can be supporting as long as they're not stopping a roundabout going in or stopping something else going in. Non-flexible barrier systems, probably supporting. So there's a bit of death and serious injury remaining. Those are the sort of things that sit into supporting. Now, don't be confused by this term primary to think it's number one, like as in it's my primary recommendation is this and my secondary. No, primary is the categorization. So you may have 5 primary treatments, or you may not have any primary treatments that you suggest. It may be only supporting things. We'd love primary. It's just a way to say these are your bigger ticket ones that are going to give you significant step change, and the supporting are smaller, tweaking around the edges. Non-safe systems really just in there for terminology. Anything that makes things worse alignment with safe system principles, or is genuinely hampering your ability to do primary in the future. But as I say, this is probably one of the hardest things for people to get their head around. So maybe, Kathy, if you have that available, it'd be worth just showing, just because my experience in marking many hundreds of assignments is that I am often going, okay, great job, great assessment, great scoring. Your categorization of primary and supporting is not good.
Thanks, Ken. So I will just take you, so we're looking at the Safe System Assessment Framework, and what I'll do is just take you on to where that is. Not there. So in the resources section, those fact sheets that you spoke about earlier, there's a link to them in the resources bit. And I'll bring one up because we've also had a question about that. But in the reference document and resources section, there is a heap of resources in here on everything. You talked about the Victorian guidelines, the South Australian guidelines. There's a whole section just for Queensland in here as well. But we're looking at the Austroad Safe System Assessment Framework. Sorry, I know that's probably a bit small. That's a bit better. And that's that document. Stop the top there. When screen lets me do it. There it is there. And we go down to page 19 is where it kicks off. And there's those primary and supporting treatments. And you've got some supporting treatments in here in yellow and sort of an orangey colour there, Ken. What's that about?
Yeah, so at one point, the Austroads document had supporting step towards and supporting. The thinking behind that was that some supporting treatments help us get primary treatments in the future, like a wide centre line tends to be helpful in getting a central barrier system at some point in the future. But most jurisdictions went, wow, most people are finding this pretty hard to get their head around primary and supporting anyway. Adding, secondary categories of supporting is just making things way, way too complicated. So Victoria sort of jumped in and said, listen, just combine those two. They're supporting. And South Australia followed, and most jurisdictions tend to tick along that way. But you may see that still floating around in some Austroads documents.
So there's a whole series. So this one is the runoff road, and then it just goes on all the different options in there. So you've got head on, and it also shows you which area it influences, whether it's exposure, likelihood, or severity. So this is a good one to refer to when you're doing your safe system assessment. Something else, a question came through about multiple intersections. How do you manage an SSA for a length of road project with, multiple intersections and so on and so forth? And just bringing up a fact sheet on that, Ken, because that's a question you've been asked before.
Yes, here's one we prepared earlier. A great question. In fact, in the one of the versions, the third version, it is certainly in there now, of the Victorian guidelines, there's an appendix on this topic. We got our fact sheet out, I suppose, a bit earlier than that, and that one has been added into that as a specific bit of guidance. So we're showing that. But have you got that fact sheet? No.
I do. I had it all ready to go and now I've lost it.
Okay.
It's convenient, isn't it?
It's a PDF, so. Yeah,
I know. Anyway, it doesn't matter. There's another question that's come in though, so answer that one while we're getting there. What is the rough cost? Yeah.
I was going to say you could go to our website and get the fact sheet if you need.
Maybe that's where it is. Anyway, no. What is the rough cost for carrying out a safe system assessment? So here's your cost estimator, Ken. For example, say a four-leg intersection which was identified under black spot funding.
Yeah, I can see your Dell computers arrived as well.
Yeah.
A safe system assessment, generally what we're discovering across industry has sort of got itself into about the same cost as a road safety audit. So, because that is it's a hard thing to answer, that question. I mean, certainly you go to a big multinational who has huge overheads and big things, it'll cost you more. You go to the single local provider who lives at that intersection, it's going to be less. So there's those factors. There's a whole lot of other factors, and there's bits and pieces. But what I just say is that your cost of a road safety audit and a safe system assessment should be generally about the same. Okay. I say generally, I mean, there's still less safe system assessors out there. So you've got a bit of supply demand pushing it up a little bit potentially. But we are seeing a lot more safe system assessors, some really great young people getting into it and really getting a good understanding of it. So that's good and being supported by others. So yeah, I just say on par with a road safety audit. And I hope whoever asked that has got a good bit of a gauge for what a road safety audit would cost. Yeah. Okay. Oh, good. There are the fact sheets. Well done.
Found them eventually. So here are all the fact sheets. So you can have a look at them there. And the one I wanted to bring up just in relation to that earlier question was about multiple distinct sections and how you do a safe system assessment there.
Yeah, and it's really, it lays out two options for you. One being to chop it up into sections, which is generally the Victorian government's guidance. Other jurisdictions aren't too fast. Or the other is to undertake a weighted average style assessment. So you still chop it up, but then you use weighted averages to come out with total results. I'm not a fan of that. I've got a colleague, Chris Hall, who some of you probably know, who just absolutely loves it. He loves setting up his 20 tabs on a spreadsheet and coming out with, lengths, volumes, and adjusting as a result of that. I like to just go, there it is. You're not going to get a final score for your whole project. You get scores along the way, and that's how it plays out. I might bring up actually an example of one, though, that was done in this big, massive, weighted average style way, because they really needed final scores for these long routes, just to show you how it can play out, because it's kind of interesting. Anyway, thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, Ken.
I've got a few more slides.
Yep.
And then we will show people what they've got to do.
Absolutely. Keep the questions coming through.
Okay. I don't remember where my slides are. Okay. So Kathy's beautifully shown you there where you can get more information on primary treatment, supporting treatments, and get some ideas. So have a look at that when you're there. Now, in a full safe system assessment, we do more than just the matrix. We answer these qualitative questions associated with the other elements of the safe system: the road users, the vehicles, and the post-crash care. Now, some people like to do this at the start of their assessment. Others sort of leave it there. And I'm more at the start, because some of these may influence your scoring a little bit. But what you're asked to do in the safe system assessment is answer these questions. You're not putting scores to these, you're just answering. And I'll just read through them briefly. I mean, a lot of them, if you're doing a safe system assessment on an intersection, like for example, that one, black spot program intersection or the like, a lot of these are going to be not applicable or not relevant or don't really make sense to ask. But the reason they're in there is because of the scalability of the safe system assessment. You could do a safe system assessment on an entire remote community, for example, or a mine site, or technically a whole network or the like. So we've got to be able to scale it. So some of them you just write not applicable. So let's have a look. Are road users likely to be alert and compliant? And are there factors that might influence this? What are the expected compliance enforcement levels, drugs, alcohol, speed, driving hours, and the like? What is the likelihood of driver fatigue? Are we talking about a long length of road, quite far from anywhere, or are we talking about an urban environment with lots going on? Can enforcement activities be conducted safely? Are there special road users, so entertainment precinct, elderly, children, on-road activities, and the like? So when you're asking these questions of yourself and your team and you're discussing them, you say, well, can enforcement be conducted safely? you'd be saying, well, okay, they're planning to, do continuous barriers, and we like that, and that's really good scores in the match. How are they going to do enforcement now? Is that going to impact their ability to pull over? Is that, where would they put a number plate recognition vehicle or a speed camera? And sometimes you can, with obviously permission from your client or discussion with your client, you can have discussions with the local highway patrol and talk to them and put the design out. And we've seen some amazing sort of results from that discussion. I remember a couple in particular, but one we was talking about a outer suburban duplication and saying, well, this is what's going to happen. What are your thoughts? And they're like, oh, well, we do enforcement on that road, and we do that, and those alterations are going to make that really hard. And in fact, under our occupational health and safety protocols, we won't be able to actually do any pulling over in any of this section now. And then there was, discussion, and there's an old stack site there, and that's sort of going to be a bit of sort of useless land. It's got, maybe a little bit of landscaping or something, but maybe that could be created into a purpose-built enforcement facility and an area up the road for the number plate recognition vehicle. And all of a sudden, with some very minor tweaks to the project and no extra cost at all, almost no extra cost in the scheme of the $100 million project that was going on, it was a purpose-built enforcement bay and an area where they could, vehicles would go past, the number plate recognition vehicle, it would inform down the road a couple of 100 meters, cars that should be pulled, flagged in. They could set the traffic management up, and on minor traffic management was needed because they were pulling people off the road. It was protected by a barrier. I mean, it's just a wonderful scenario, literally because in those stages, those questions were being asked. Now, a lot of designers are pretty good at this sort of stuff anyway, and project managers, and thinking about that in the development of a project, but it's another way that these questions are being asked. The vehicles. What level of alignment is there with the ideals of safer vehicles? I mean, that's a very broad, open-ended question, talking about vehicles of the future, safer vehicles. It often really is not applicable when you're doing individual intersections and the like, but if you're doing a community or a mine site, you're talking about what's their fleet, what are they doing in that sense? Are there factors that might attract a large number of unsafe vehicles? Is the percentage of heavy vehicles too high for the route? Is the route used by recreational motorcyclists? Are there resources to detect non-roadworthy, overloaded, unregistered vehicles? Can enforcement of that be conducted safely if we've got weigh stations, we've got those sorts of things on these long routes? Has vehicle breakdown been catered for? And then post-crash care. So after the event of a crash, how does the road or the area facilitate assisting that? Are there issues that might influence safe and efficient post-crash care in the event of severe injury? So congestion, access, stopping space. That one plays out most if you're doing a motorway style safe system assessment or a tunnel or something like that. Public road network, usually not too much, but it's nice that somebody's thinking about this. Do emergency and medical services operate as efficiently and rapidly as possible? Or efficiently as possible. This one's an interesting one again, and most of the time you say, oh, well, it's an urban area or whatever, it's nothing extraordinary here, but there's been some examples where it's sort of motorcycle routes up in the mountains. In New Zealand, one that comes to mind particularly, and it was just discussions and found out that it was really taking many hours to get to injured parties, and the helicopter, the closest that they could land was, quite far away, and it was all, very challenging. And so, within the project, the construction of some helicopter landing areas in strategically placed locations was part of the infrastructure upgrades, and it's very sort of holistic system thinking there. So that might, bring out some other ideas. Are other road users, emergency response teams protected during the crash event? Are drivers provided correct information to address travel speeds on the approach and to the incident? Is there information available via radio VMS? Again, a lot of these you might say, well, no, nothing or not applicable, and really nothing that we're going to be recommending or suggesting. Is there provision for e-safety, safety system based on modern information, communication technology, cooperative intelligent transport systems, and those sorts of things? Vehicles of the future, you might get into a bit of thinking around that. Again, most of the safe system assessments, you just say, well, nothing and not really applicable for this site. But, you know, if you're doing a brand new, you know, tunnel motorway system or something like that, so it's going to be a very relevant question to ask. Okay, and then you sort of report all of this up, and there's some dot points here of what would be expected to be in a safe system assessment report. You know, who was in the assessment team, when were site inspections happening, the process, background, context, the matrix, and all of that. But luckily now we have some government issued templates that you will be using, and you are free to use, and you're free to take and use your own branding on them and do whatever you want, but it's about consistency of output. So, you know, anybody that does a safe system assessment is producing the same overarching sort of reporting product. And that's what we're going to be asking you to use for your safe system assessment, your assignment. And we're going to give you the rapid safe system template. There are rapid and full safe system assessment templates available. I will explain the difference between a rapid and a full in more detail in our final session. The rapid one we're going to get you to do doesn't include those qualitative questions I just went through, the bigger picture questions and all of that. It's just the matrix, the recommendation, the graphs and things. It's still a fair bit of work. It's not like it's done in 5 minutes. It's still a decent chunk of work. It's just streamlined a little bit more than the full one. But you will be going through, you'll be filling out the bits that we've highlighted. Kathy's going to bring that up shortly, but I'm just going to give you a little safety briefing before we show you the specifics of what you've got to do. So we are going to ask you to go out to a site. The site is in your local area, so near your house or near your workplace or whatever address you gave us. The sites have all been looked at or specifically purpose designed for you, or we know it's a council job in the area that we know about. We've risk assessed each of those to ensure that they can be done safely. They're low risk from an occupational health and safety sense, that you can get out there, that you can view the intersection or the short length very safely. We ask that you wear a high-vis vest when you're out there, and you should have those, or we've sent you a loan one for the purposes of the course. So make sure you're wearing the high-vis vest. There's no need to be spending long periods of time on the road. No need to do things like measuring lane widths or put your head down to look at the crossfall of the road or anything like that, okay? What you're out there to do is get a general feel for how the area operates, to look at the design, to imagine it being built, how it will tie in, general feel and understanding for the area. So you can do all of that from standing away from the road itself and just observing. Don't be a hazard yourself. Don't make people walk onto the road to get around you as you're sort of standing there. Park safely. Don't park in places where you're going to block critical sight lines, or you're going to make cyclists have to go into running lanes. And we'll ask you to fill out a safe work method statement, which again, Kathy's going to show you shortly. It's a very sort of standard one. We've done it for these sites and this training in particular, but it covers off some, COVID protocol, but also some pretty common sense stuff like agreeing that you're not going to go out there when you're intoxicated, and you're going to take responsibility for your safety, as we are doing through the risk assessments and the like that we've done on the site. So have a look at that, and you will be asked to just confirm that you will operate under that. So that's that. So it's time for Kathy to jump into Moodle and show you through all of that stuff. And please pop your questions in about how you're going to do this and what you've got to do.
Thank you, Ken. Okay, so here we are in module 4, and there is that safe work method statement you spoke about, Ken. That's the agreement that you say that you've read that and agreed to abide by it. This is your safe system assessment section, which many of you have already jumped in and had a look at because we asked you to have a look at your site. So this is your design option that's in there. And then there's the template that is the document that you need to complete. So the template looks like this. And Ken has very helpfully crossed out the sections that you don't need to do, and you complete only the highlighted sections. So if you see a highlight in yellow, that's your cue to do something, but probably don't complete that highlighted bit. So we scroll down, and you don't have to do the contents, you don't have to do the figures. Oh, hold on, you pop your name in here as the assessment team. Now, I think everybody's got individual sites, but there might be some who might be more than one person. There's one. So if you do see your site and there's another person's name in there as well, it means that somebody lives near you in Wagga Wagga, for example. And if you'd like to get in touch with them and do it together, you can do it together as a team. It just means that you need to put both people's name on the document. I've done it again. Have I lost the document?
As you're saying that, I'll just reiterate that. If you happen to work with somebody else, which we're okay with, as long as you're working on it as a team and the like, but you really have to put both of your names in there and both submit the report into your Moodle housing area. If we see two the same and we don't know that they've worked together, we start to get suspicious. But anyway.
Absolutely. Okay, so we don't need to do this section. Here we go. Second bit of highlighted. What do we do here, Ken?
So proposed works, I mean, you tend to summarize what they're planning to do. So you'll look at the design. A really easy way for this is to just snip the design and put it in there. And I always encourage that throughout road safety auditing and safe system assessments. I always put a snip of bits and pieces so people can see it. So you could do that, or you can write a little description of what they're planning, building new roundabout with this and that. Here's a snip of it. Again, don't spend long on it, just enough to say, that's what's happening. The assessment summary is the next bit there. Now you'll write that after you've done your assessment, because it's like a bit of a summary of here are the scores and here's what really influenced those scores. And you'll see there your overarching end scores out of 448 for the existing conditions and the design option. You only have one design option for this assignment. And then we're going to want you to put in the graph, and you're going to have to build that in Excel. But Kathy's been nice and her Excel skills have come through with the goods, and has created a little thing to help you quickly create a safe system assessment graph. So well done, Kathy. And thanks, you can just put your numbers in and it will spit out a graph for you. And then, sorry?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. So you pop in your existing conditions number and your design option 1 for this one, and a graph will magically appear here, and you can snip that and pop it in. If you want to use this for the future, there's design option, 2 design options and 3 design options available to you as well.
So you can snip that or copy it, paste it as a picture or paste it or whatever you do, and then you've got your graph in there. But, in order to get to those numbers and be able to produce that graph, you're going to need to fill out the matrix. And you've got the one matrix here. You've just got the existing conditions matrix. You can see it in the heading there, existing conditions. So insert existing conditions. So this is you'll do the existing conditions first, and you'll fill out that, and you'll put in factors, and you'll put in scores, and you'll make it so you're all happy with that. You put lots of factors in there, and then you'll copy that. You filled it all out, copy it. Very good. Copy, and you'll go down and you'll go, right, time to put a paste. Well, how's that?
Getting there.
Oh, you pasted it on a portrait. But anyway, that's all right.
It still worked.
It did work. It's a little squashed. But anyway, they'll work that out. And then you go through and you use the strike through feature.
Okay, right. Oh no.
Strike through for things that have been removed in that design option. And you create and you make the things red colored for things that are new. Change the score numbers as well for those scores that change. Then you go down a little bit further and you say, thanks for that design, and it was good. But here are some things that would make it better. Okay, and then you say some change. You might look at the Safe System Assessment Framework document. You might get some ideas from there. You might come up with some other ideas yourself, and you would. Oh yeah, there we go. Okay, so you're gonna make it flexible median barriers or whatever, or you've chosen, and you go, okay, that's primary. Yeah, okay. And I suggest, so we suggest you have a think about that. Consider central barrier system, addition of central barrier system. Consider raising the intersection. Consider a mast arm, an extra traffic signal, whatever it is. You write your however many ideas you come up with. Add more rows if you want. Don't fill out the project response. See, it's not highlighted. Okay, that's left there for the project team, whoever receives this report, to make a response. Yeah, we're going to do that, or no, can't do that because it triples the budget of the project and we can't do it, but thank you for the idea. We'll consider this instead. To do those for primary and supporting. We're not going to make you write a conclusion, and we're simply going to ask that you put one photo in. And that one photo is you in your high-vis vest at the site. And that's because we've generally with the different jurisdictional governments talked about what requirements there are for this course, and they want people to go to a site. We want people to go to a site as well, because it shows the value you get in that understanding and viewing of the site in the context of it, and so that will help in the future that you realize, yeah, going to the site's a pretty important part of these safe system assessments. So just a photo of you at the site.
I've just brought up the example safe system assessment that we've got in the resources folder as well. So again, I think, Ken, you've been through this during today's session, but here's the existing conditions. That's what that looks like. Here's your design option. And you can see there the things that have come out, the things that have gone in, and the score that's changed. There you go. You see that? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's good. I was just sorry, I'm just checking. I was going to potentially show another one, but I'm not sure we're going to quite have time for me to go through it in detail. A couple of other points, or just some tips from me on what common things that people lose marks on their safe system assessment are. So if we go back to the matrix, yeah. Thank you. So yeah, that's nicer, yeah. You probably won't lose marks for having it as portrait instead of landscape, but it'll get me in my eyes will be twitching as I start to read it, which is yeah. It's not about formatting the document, but it always puts your assessor, your marker in a nicer position if it looks half decent. So the things that people lose marks for are, first of all, getting adding things in exposure that aren't exposure or likelihood, as you did for your other assignment. Next one is not putting enough factors in, just putting one factor in or one factor and really not enough detail. We want to see some, there's quite a few things that will influence the likelihood of runoff road. The speed, the surface, the lighting, the line marking, the delineation, the crossfall, the geometrics, and I'm just off the top of my head without even, really looking at a site to think about that. So we want to see those dot points in. The next one is that sometimes people will put a score lower than 4 without anything that decreases the likelihood, if that makes sense. So if you're not going to put anything to decrease the likelihood of crash, then the score's 4. So you can't say factors that decrease the likelihood of crash, none, and then have a 2 in there, because you're like, well, how did you get to 2? Something must be there. It can be it could be just the prevailing operating speed, and that's fine. But we really want to see that there would be something that brings that down. So there are a couple of things in the matrix people often get wrong. I'm just trying to think what else people. Occasionally, people forget to color and strike through the differences. So we get a matrix which is really quite good for the existing conditions, and then another matrix, and you cannot. It's really hard to see what's changed, and you've got to because they haven't marked it up. It hasn't been strike throughs, hasn't been colored, and even coloring the numbers, the change that helps, because this is good for anybody receiving a safe system. They can go, okay, we've improved in these bits. Okay, that was because of that. Okay, I see that. That's because of that, and that helps us mark your assignment as well. Going down into, as we've talked a fair bit about the incorrect categorization. So use that safe system assessment framework, have a look at that, put those ideas in there. So that will help. Also, another one that you'll lose marks on, it's a little bit harder to find, is really if your recommendations are just sort of nothingness, just put up the warning sign, basically. All of these have the ability to have some pretty fundamental improvements in alignment with safe system principles. We like to, we want them to be, generally feasible, but you really have the opportunity to push some significant improvements in there. So there's that, and then forgetting to put your photo of you on site in there is one, and so that's that. There are a few little tips.
Thank you, Ken. Now I'm just thinking through as well. I'm just going to bring one of these up. So this is the design option that you've been given. We've also got a question that's come through. In New South Wales, with Transport for New South Wales projects, road safety audits do not provide recommendations. What is your experience with dealing with New South Wales SSA projects and providing recommendations, i.e. supportive?
Yeah, so you provide recommendations, but you'll notice in safe system assessments, we call them considerations, trying to maybe make it a little easier. So if I had to bet on it, I would say New South Wales will be including recommendations in their road safety audits in the next few years, because But yeah, certainly safe system assessments in New South Wales make ideas for consideration for the project for improvement and alignment with safe system principles. But that's a very long title, so considerations or recommendations. But they are just that, though. I mean, it's perfectly acceptable and very common practice to say we can't do that. Sorry, we're going to do something else instead, or we're going to try this instead. So yeah, there are some fabricated AADTs on there to assist you. They may be fabricated, they may be real, but most likely they will be made up. And so if that's your local street and you go, there is not 7,000 vehicles per day on there, well, you're going through a training exercise and practicing and utilizing this. So just use what is said there. And you might get unknown in some of them, and that's where you make a judgment call. But they're in there just so, I suppose, people who get the design and have absolutely no idea what the volumes would be, they've got something to work off. But just for us to be able to mark, for us to be confident that if it's 7,000, that's a 3, that you've got that ability to get the right score.
You're already giving away some answers there, Ken. Okay. Any other questions? What we would like you to do is get out there and try and do your site visit within the next week, before our last session, which is next Friday. And that way, once you've gone out there and you've had a look at things and started the process, you might have some more questions to come back with. So that's, we set aside some time in our next session for that as well. But then you've got 2 weeks before this is due. So we give you 2 weeks to get your safe system assessment in. You just submit it through Moodle the way you've done the previous one. And there is a short 10-question quiz this week as well. I think covered everything. Any questions or anything else, Ken?
I just want to reiterate the offer of assistance to people. I mean, we've covered a lot there. You've been handed a big package of stuff you got to do now, and yeah, you may feel a little overwhelmed, and that's okay. That's all right. You can get out there and have a go at it, or if you're really still struggling to get your head around it, get in contact. We can have a one-on-one session. We've got a variety of people available to help mentor and coach you, explain these different bits and pieces with you. If you start to get into it and you're really struggling, yeah, you can reach out again, or you can come to the next session and ask that question so everybody gets the benefit of hearing the answer. Happy to go in next session live, looking at somebody's site and talking through things. We're really, flexible to assist and help you through this. Yeah, but I think you'll enjoy it. It's an enjoyable thing to look at these areas, to imagine how they're going to change and imagine how we can get the absolute best reduction in death and serious injury out of them, and be free to make ideas and recommendations. And yeah, always good to get out on the site and have a look at something close to home as well, which is an advantage. So enjoy it.
Excellent. Well, we don't have any questions, but yes, as Ken said, get in touch with us over the course of the next week or whenever, and we're here to help. Have a great weekend.
See ya.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.